Good afternoon. Welcome to Studio One on this Thursday, November 12th. It is nice to have you with us after a short Veterans Day break, at least for some of us. I'm Tom Wirin. Up ahead on this half hour, space law expert and Air Force Colonel William Wirin will discuss the use of outer space to promote peace. Also joining us in for a two-day visit, Miss America 1987 Kelleye. And finally, one of the legendary men of the Apollo 11 moon landing, astronaut turned professor Dr. Buzz Aldrin. First, however, with every edition of Studio One, we go to the news desk with Courtney Bateman. Courtney?
Thank you, Tom. If you're looking for free parking in certain areas on the UND campus, your time may have expired. On Monday, 54 parking meters began marking time at the Memorial Union and the Hislop Sports Center East Lot. Parking Office Director Wallace Bloom says a few tickets have been issued, but he expects better compliance as more people become aware of the meters. The meters cost 25 cents per half hour, and they don't accept checks. The U.S. trade deficit dropped a hefty $1.6 billion in September, the best performance in 4 months. Investors were obviously pleased. The Dow Jones rocketed up 61 points today. You've probably heard of the Grand Forks Mission. Perhaps you've driven past it or donated items to the Mission thrift store without knowing who lives there or why. Today's Studio One reporter Kelleye Evenson takes a look at the mission and its residents.
Grand Forks Mission residents are very protective of their home, and they'll tell you it's one big family that looks out for one another.
But I was living in Fort Totten, and this guy decided that he wanted to start beating on me. The only place that I felt comfortable, where I was around my friends, and where I knew I could be protected from the people on the outside, was right here.
Mission Director Dwayne Steinkeeler says the mission is a place for those who are down on their luck, without a job or family support. It's a place for them to get their life back in order and keep them off the streets.
Our basic goal is to eventually take every person and eventually make them into tax-paying citizens.
The mission houses chronically mentally ill residents who are capable of living outside an institution. The mission helps residents with alcohol problems by offering counseling and Alcohol Anonymous meetings. Steinkeeler says about 40% of the residents are in their 20s, signifying that the nation's youth are distraught. One young resident wants to become a correction officer, and he needs 2 more years of school, but he can't afford college tuition without a job, and he can't find a job in his present situation. It's a vicious circle. No money, no education, no education, no job, no job, no money. Job Service attempts to find jobs for the residents, but it's not easy to find well-paying, year-round jobs for these people with limited skills and a lack of self-esteem.
And it hasn't been easy to get a job once they have completed the school. Probably some of them don't do as well because they don't sell themselves as well as maybe some of the other people who feel better about themselves will do.
While the Grand Forks Mission provides transients and the homeless with food and shelter, limited funds don't allow for the personal counseling and job training needed for these people to support themselves. But there is hope with a job coaching program in the works. I'm Kelleye Evenson, Studio One News.
And that's the news for this afternoon. Tom?
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Today begins a 3-day conference at the University of North Dakota. The conference is free and plans to answer all questions concerning relationships. Women and Men Together, Boundaries and Bridges is sponsored by the UND Women's Center and will include a series of panels and workshops. You can call campus information for more details. Also at the Memorial Union, the University Program Council will sponsor a lecture entitled Victims and Victims' Rights. That'll be Tuesday, November 17th at 8 o'clock. Lisa Sliwa, co-founder of the Guardian Angels, will talk about defense tactics for women, and a former model actress, Marla Hansen, will talk about her brutal slashing and her personal fight for victims' rights. Meteorologist Jay Searles now joins us to give us a look at the weather. Jay?
Thank you, Tom. Currently at 4 in the Grand Forks area, under a mostly cloudy sky, the temperature is 55 degrees, the humidity is 46%, and the winds are northwesterly at 7 miles per hour. Taking a look at the map across the nation, yesterday we had a balmy high of 89 degrees at Indio, California. And the nation's low was a chilly 15 degrees at Watertown, New York. An area of high pressure has moved into the southeast behind that storm that blanketed much of the east coast with heavy snow. 12 inches of snow fell in Washington, D.C., and was responsible for about 7 deaths along the northeast coast. That area of high pressure brought cool conditions across the southeast. Many record lows were set well into the south this morning. And another area of high pressure is pushed into the Rockies, bringing some cool conditions, but clear skies as well this afternoon, except for some mild temperatures along the coast with some dense coastal fog. In our area, a trough moved through this morning, bringing some scattered showers, and a wind shift out of the northwest. A cold front has developed this afternoon, spreading some high clouds into our area. Temperatures are basically in the 50s and not too bad. That's what it looks like across the United States today. I'm meteorologist Jay Searles, and I'll be back a little bit later in the program with the Red River Valley weekend forecast. Tom?
Okay, thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. The Minneapolis Ondahazi Ballet will grace Grand Forks Saturday night. The UND Honors Program is sponsoring the event, which begins at 7 o'clock. The lecture performance is free and open to the public, and reception will follow the program. And on Sunday night at 8:15, the Chester Fritz presents Christian rock at its finest. David Meese will bring his energetic music style to the Fritz. Tickets are still available and on sale at the Chester Fritz and all Cintiq outlets. And for Sioux sports fans, well, they have quite a few things to cheer about for both football and hockey this weekend. The Sioux football team faces traditional rival NDSU at Fargo Saturday with a 1:30 kickoff. You can be sure that they will pull out the stops for everything on that one. Also this weekend on ice, the Wisconsin series promises to be an exciting one as the Sioux face off with the Badgers at the Winter Sports Center. Game times for both are at 7:35. When we return, we'll talk to Colonel William Wirin.
Clint Eastwood is a little upset.
Seems some misguided individuals out there are abusing our public lands, and I don't like it. And I don't think you do either. Vandalizing parks and robbing historic sites or overrunning wild areas, those are ours, and we have to save them. As I see it, these clowns can either clean up their act or get out of town.
Write Take Pride in America. Post Office Box 1339, Jessup, Maryland 20794.
How does this man consistently draw 2,000 students a year to New York's most talked about film class? How does he attract the finest creative talent in the film world? Guests like Woody Allen, Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese, Dustin Hoffman, Deborah Winger, William Hurt, Steven Spielberg, Robin Williams, Robert Redford, Shirley MacLaine, just to name a few? Why do his students describe him as brilliant, charismatic, and his class provocative, inspiring, exhilarating? Find out for yourself. Richard Brown's Screening Room, a whole new way to look at movies. Watch it on NCTV.
Welcome back. William Wirin is a retired Air Force colonel who has used his legal and military background to develop several concepts in space law, military space activities, and space peace treaties. He has worked as an advocate and consultant for the Air Force in critical areas involving national and international policies in space. It is a privilege to have you with us, Colonel.
Thank you. Good to be up here. I'm glad the weather's been so great.
It's been nice just for you.
Right. Well, I'm sure of that.
Come back in 2 weeks and it'll be a different story. We talk about space and law. That is now very much a reality. Several years back, it would kind of be more of a Buck Rogers maybe mentality. But that's no longer the case. Space and law is a real issue.
It's a very real issue, and there's some real problems that have to be resolved because there are competing interests with regard to space, and law usually evolves so that people have some answers to what the conflicts may be.
Current laws in space, I'm ignorant of them. What current laws exist in space?
Okay, we have 5 treaties at present. The first one is the Outer Space Treaty going back to 1967. We then have a treaty that deals with liability, who sues whom, how much they get. We then have one on registration, which requires that if you launch into space, you have to notify the United Nations, giving them certain orbital parameters, telling them what you're doing, so that there's some record of what you're doing. We have another one dealing with return of astronauts. For instance, if an astronaut has trouble in space, and it details the obligations of other nations to help that astronaut. We also have a moon treaty.
So you can go on and on and on.
Right.
Are they growing?
Yes, there's continual concern. As a matter of fact, the United Nations just this last year concluded 15 principles on remote sensing. That deals with who can and who cannot and how they take pictures from space of other nations. There's a lot of concern. For instance, the third world is apprehensive that if a rich American company knew where the right deposits were, that they might come in and steal them. So there's a lot of concern by the third world. There's concern by the United States. Do you have a right to, for instance, the image that you take from space? The answer is yes, you do. How to protect those?
Who's the enforcing body?
There is really no enforcing body, per se. There is world opinion. And maybe that's the best enforcing body, because if a treaty is a good treaty, then it means people want to live up to it. You really can't force anybody to do something they don't want to do.
Colonel Wirin, where does space legally begin?
That's a good question, and the answer is nobody has said for sure. But I suppose it's critical because if you fly in airspace, you have to have permission. You may remember the KAL-007 didn't have permission and was shot down by the Soviets. Probably space begins where you can successfully orbit a space vehicle, probably about 110 kilometers or 66 miles. At least from the engineering standpoint, that's a good definition.
Understanding that the U.S. and both the USSR would both be deeply involved in the treaty, can we underestimate the motivation of the Soviets involved? Perhaps their motivations may be different than ours. How do you deal with that in a treaty?
I suspect that the motivations many times by the Soviets, by the United States, and as a matter of fact, many other countries are different. We come to a treaty or to any problem with a Western mindset. The Soviets, for instance, tend to come to a treaty from an Eastern mindset. And sometimes we use the same words and mean different things. Sometimes we do the same things and mean different things by them. You've hit on a very critical point. We need to understand both the Soviets and other nations better. For instance, we need to understand Canada better. And I'm not so sure Canada couldn't do better to understand us.
Talking more about some of the involvement with the USSR, are we in a place where we can compete in space with the USSR?
I have a feeling at this point they're competing and we're not. In my view, the leading space nation in the world today is the Soviet Union. They have the capability of launching whenever they want to go into space. They presently have on orbit a space station. They have men, and military men for that matter, that have vastly more experience in space than our astronauts have. If you're looking for the leading space nation, I think you have to go to the Soviet Union.
Pursuing, taking a step ahead, pursuing space exploration, the Department of Defense may be taking a lead in some things. Should there be more of an opening to the private sector, to the commercial world, to dive into space exploration?
The commercial sector has to get behind space. There's no question about that. But there's a trade-off here. I think we are at the point when the government must support and underwrite some of the basic risks in going into space. But I think they have to do it with a view towards commercializing space. I'm very pleased to see the Department of the Air Force order space services rather than launchers. Let me explain. In the past, we have bought machines to go into space. The Air Force has, which means that nobody really has the full package. I like to buy a turnkey job. I want to hire some company to take me there and let them take the risk of failure. And that's what we're doing, and it's a good step forward.
Thanks for coming by. We appreciate the time.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in hearing more, Colonel William Wirin, who is a space law advocate, he'll be speaking to the Aerospace Law Society tonight at 7:30 at UND Center for Aerospace Sciences. The talk is free and open to the public. After this break, we'll talk with Miss America 1987, Kelleye Cash.
We give you the truth. Uncensored. Powerful documentaries every week.
South Africa belongs to all the people who live in it, not to one group, be it black or white.
I'm too old. I'm too fat.
We're a long way from equality in any field.
Uncensored. Discover it every week on NCTV.
Do you have your passport?
For the third time, yes.
Do you have everything?
Kids, relax. If we weren't grown-ups, they wouldn't have let us join the Peace Corps.
Peace Corps. It's creating food systems in Africa, building homes in Costa Rica, and fighting malaria in Asia. It's teaching math and learning French. It's working side by side. It's been tough, but for 25 years, the Peace Corps has been making a difference in the world.
Mom, Dad, I'm so proud of you.
Peace Corps, the toughest job you'll ever love.
Welcome back. In September of 1986, our next guest took the Miss America pageant by storm with her piano artistry and rich voice. She is currently on a concert tour of the United States before finishing her communications degree. We'd like to welcome to Studio One the 1987 Miss America, Kelleye Cash. Kelleye, it's good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. Now that introduction sounds like something my mother would write, to be perfectly honest.
Well, we did receive it in the mail about a week ago.
You did?
How was the year? You relieved to have it done to a certain extent? Was it? Let me ask you this: was it more of an adjustment to take the crown, or was it more of an adjustment to give it back?
Oh, I think it was more of an adjustment to take it, because all of a sudden I had to go on the road and be at everyone else's fingertips, you know, for them to tell me where to go and what to do. And that was really a switch. But, you know, after a couple months, got used to it, got used to the flights, the long hours, the high-heeled shoes, you know, although my feet did take a toll. And after I gave up the crown, I was a little relieved. You know, it was exciting and I have wonderful memories, but it was kind of nice to be able to go back to Memphis, sleep in my bed, you know, with my family.
I would imagine the Miss America pageant, obviously it's probably much like a lottery. Overnight, you get a ticket to success and
it's by chance, as far as I'm concerned.
But nevertheless, I'm sure that's something to deal with. When the year is done, Kelleye, is there much, does that help your motivation, or could that hinder it? You're 22, your career can peak suddenly. Can you turn that into motivation, or do you think some Miss Americas maybe get spoiled by it?
Well, I'm sure there's a little of both. I imagine that at the very beginning, after giving up the crown, you do get a little spoiled. But all of a sudden you come back to the real world and you realize what has happened, how fortunate you are, and how you can use those experiences to motivate yourself to bigger and better things. Right after the crown, I tried to rest. I still did some concerts. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me that 85,000 girls tried to become Miss America my year, and I was the one fortunate enough to become Miss America. And I looked back on my year and I tried to use the experiences, the bad, the good ones, and apply them towards bigger and better things.
When did the idea first come to your head that you would at least compete? I wouldn't assume when you started you first thought you'd be Miss America, but when did the idea first come?
Well, let's see. As I would say, every young girl thinks about it, but I did not think about it realistically until college, when I was working 2 jobs at Memphis State University. And I found out that the Miss Memphis State pageant was actually a scholarship pageant. I remember hearing about that before and thinking, yeah, right. This is that pageant where the girls get up and say, I want to make peace and be a brain surgeon. You know, I thought, oh, what am I getting myself into? But then I realized that you can only use the scholarship if you're presently in school. After you receive your bachelor's degree, you can get the scholarship in any way that you would like, to further a master's program, or to get it in cash, or to invest it. And I saw that it would really be beneficial to my career, and also that half the points come from talent. And so all of a sudden, my sophomore, junior year in college, this idea came into my head, and I'll tell you, I took it by storm, and I worked so hard, and within 6 months, I was Miss America. So at the beginning, I really didn't think I'd go all the way, but...
With 100 different contestants, maybe 100 different reasons for being there and the motivation involved, from benefits to just the accomplishment, reaching a goal, to the title, what was the most pleasurable for you?
Oh, well, let's see. I guess the fact that I actually did it. You know, the self-satisfaction it gave me that I competed, that I worked my best, and after we finished the top 10 on Saturday night, at that moment, I did not care whether I had won or not. I sat back and I went, I really did it. I went through this week. I worked. I learned this silly song, and I was so sick of the song, but boy, I had it down. You know, I could sing it real well and play it real well. And I guess knowing that I could use all of those things inside of me, all the talents that God has given me, and apply them towards one thing, and just, you know, watch what happens after that. That was really special.
What is next for you?
What is next? Well, I'm going back to school, Memphis State University, and on weekends I will continue to do concerts and speaking to youth groups. Most of my ministry is with Christian groups, although I do a few pageants, local pageants, state pageants. But I would like to continue in that field. I like all types of music, but Christian music is my first love.
Kelleye, thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you too.
And there is a concert tomorrow night for Kelleye Cash. She will be performing in Crookston tomorrow night at 7:30 at the University of Minnesota Crookston campus. Now, we just happen to have a couple tickets to give away for the show. Be our 3rd and 7th callers at 777-4346, and you and your guests will attend the concert on us. If you don't win here, tickets are still available at the door. After this, legendary man on the moon, Dr. Buzz Aldrin.
Think for a minute. If every one of us gave just 5 hours a week, if we gave just 5% of what we earn to the causes we say we care about, it could add up to the biggest volunteer effort this country has ever seen. And we could accomplish things that right now we only dream about. Just 5 hours, just 5%. It's not that much to give, but what we could get back is immeasurable.
Welcome back to Studio One. Our next guest symbolizes one of the greatest eras in recent history. He was one of the 3 astronauts on Apollo 11, the first moon man landing. After 21 years in the Air Force, including 7.5 years as an astronaut, he is now president of a Los Angeles research firm and an advisor to numerous corporations and space projects. He's a leading voice in charting the course for future space efforts nationwide. We welcome to Studio One Dr. Buzz Aldrin. Dr. Buzz, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be back up here.
This is becoming kind of home for you, isn't it?
From time to time, as my travels across the country allow me to come back here and see some of my friends at the center. That's what I do.
And how often is that? How often do you get up here?
Well, it depends. It's not been quite so much recently because of the pace of activities that I felt I've had a responsibility toward. I've been trying to put together a group of people and I've come up with the name of Starcraft Enterprises to try and educate the public of the necessity for spaceport type operations as we move into permanence in space.
I know that you are quite involved and quite active. Would it be wrong of me to assume that your Apollo 11 flight can be topped by another project you're doing now? Or was that still one of your favorites? It was a favorite for me.
Well, the opportunity to participate in such a momentous event is indeed an awesome one. I feel that a number of people who were involved in the program and close to it could have carried out the task equally as well. So I feel that I was just fortunate enough to be selected to be on that first lunar landing. You won't understand it, but I do when I look back and feel that I was able to contribute to how we did that in addition to being one that carried out the mission. What I'm referring to is some of the analytic techniques that I did at MIT that resulted in some of the refinements to the rendezvous trajectories.
Even apart from space, for you personally as an individual, did that, I would assume it would, but what kind of a lasting impression did you have in flying to the moon? Did it do anything to you personally?
Well, people look at you differently when you come back.
Did I look differently when I asked you that?
I don't think anyone can be involved in such a momentous event where people look at them differently because of what they did, and now their name for a period of time is a common household word. They may misspell it from time to time, but it's still a household word. And certain things are expected of you. Okay, now if you're a super sensitive person, maybe a little bit of an introvert, well, you're aware that people are looking at you more than they used to, so you're a little bit more on edge about those things. And you try and live up to what you think they want you to live up to, and they're trying to figure out what it is you're supposed to be living up to, and they're not really sure. Yes, your life changes significantly as a result of being involved in momentous historical events.
If I were to ask you back on July 20th, 1969, Buzz, project the nation's research and advancement in space by 18 years, and I would ask you where would we be in our space program by 1987, answering now, would you say that we're on schedule, we're behind schedule, or are we right at a place where we're maybe lagging behind?
On July 20th, 1969, I was very concerned about doing the job in front of me. And I wasn't all that qualified, I don't believe, to even comment on what the flights 6 months from my flight ought to be doing, much less what the nation's space program should be doing the next several years. But there were some very highly qualified people in just about that time frame who were charting a course as to what we would be doing and should be doing by now, the mid-1980s. And I can reflect back and look on the decisions and the choices and the recommendations that they made then and say that indeed I think they may have been just a little optimistic, but they were on track as to what we could have done with the momentum that we built up during the 60s that culminated in our landing on the moon. And believe it or not, those projections felt that in an optimistic way, we could have man on Mars by 1982, certainly, without a doubt, by 1986. Now, we're not even thinking about going back to the moon right now. I'd say something has happened. We've lost the momentum that was put together. Now, as a nation, that is like losing a tremendous resource. And we frittered that away. Now, we should recapture that. Now, personally, That's difficult for me to accept. Now I'm very intimately involved in what it is I think we ought to be doing in the future. And I see there's not always, there's not quite that will to make commitments. And I'd sure hate to see us let down the second time.
That's all the time we've got, and what we're going to do, that gives us incentive to have you back. So we're going to have you back.
I look forward to
Dr.
it.
Buzz.
Sure,
we're
it'll
looking
be
forward
nice
to it, too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Legendary astronaut Dr. Buzz Aldrin. After this break, we'll take one last look at the weather.
Do you like music?
I do like music. Very much.
Pick something groovy, Alex.
Don't be a fool, Alex. Pick Audiophilia, the best concert show around. Every week a new concert. Motown, rock, new music, folk, funk, and a whole lot more. Audiophilia, every week on NCTV.
Swell.
McGruff here. I want you to learn a song that tells people to say no to drugs. Users and losers and losers and users. I don't use drugs. Don't use drugs. Come on. If you know a user even part of the time, tell them to quit, take a bite out of crime. Users are losers and losers are users. So don't use drugs. Don't use drugs. Now teach it to everybody and help take a bite out of crime.
Next Wednesday and Thursday, the Phi Delta Theta fraternity will sponsor a blood drive from 1 p.m. to 5:30 in the ballroom of the Union. And the Burtness Theater production As Is debuts tonight. Showtime is at 8 o'clock, Thursday through Saturday. Meteorologist Jay Searles is here to give us a final look at our weather. Jay?
Thank you, Tom. Tomorrow morning, we'll show that area of low pressure over central Ontario, trailing a cold front across northern Minnesota and back in through Saskatchewan. Temperatures north of the front will range in the lower 20s to upper 20s, and south of the front across our region, warmest temperatures will be over Wisconsin in the central 30s and in the lower 30s across from Wyoming through North and South Dakota. Tonight, under mostly cloudy skies, we'll have a low of 33 degrees, and the winds will be northwesterly at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Friday, skies will become partly cloudy with a high of 50 degrees, and Saturday we will be mild again with a high in the mid-50s. And on Sunday, we'll have mild temperatures, but increasing clouds late in the day, a little cooler later on, but all in all, not too bad. That's the forecast for the weekend. I'm meteorologist Jay Searles. Have a great weekend. Tom?
Thank you, Jay. You have a good weekend yourself. We'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Buzz Aldrin, Colonel William Wirin, and Kelleye Cash for being a part of us today. From all of us here at Studio One, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week.